Ethan Carter stood in front of the towering windows in his luxurious corner office, his gaze drifting over the vibrant chaos of the city streets below. His fingers absent-mindedly toyed with the cold metal of his wedding ring, a small but heavy reminder of the secret he'd been shouldering for years. At 42, Ethan had carved out an empire from nothing. Carter Innovations, his tech powerhouse, employed thousands and pulled in billions annually. Yet, to the outside world, and more critically, to his wife, he was just another mid-level corporate lackey, a faceless cog in a machine far grander than himself. The lie had started harmlessly enough. 5 years earlier, he had met Isabella Harper, a woman whose energy and infectious laugh had captivated him immediately. Back then, he had introduced himself simply as Ethan, omitting the minor detail that he owned the company hosting the charity gala where their eyes first met across the crowd. As their relationship deepened, he found himself clinging to the facade, having been burned before by women who saw him as little more than a golden ticket. Ethan craved something authentic. He wanted a connection rooted in trust and affection, not money and power. So he kept up the act. He rented an unassuming apartment, drove a nondescript sedan, and spun endless tales of cranky bosses and office politics. Meanwhile, his true wealth quietly flowed into charities and reinvestments in Carter Innovations. It was a delicate balance, but one he maintained with precision. His thoughts were interrupted by a light knock at the door. "Come in," he called, turning from the window. His assistant, Sophia, entered with a neat stack of reports in her hands. "The quarterly summaries you requested, Mr. Carter," she said, placing them on his desk. "Thank you, Sophia," Ethan said with a warm smile. "And please, how many times do I have to remind you? Just call me Ethan." Sophia returned the smile, teasing. "At least one more time, Mr. Carter. Are you wrapping up for the day? It's nearly 7. Ethan glanced at his watch, surprised by the late hour. "You're right. I should head out. Isabella's probably wondering where I am." Gathering his belongings, he added with a wry smile, "Another late night at the office. You know how it goes." "Of course, sir," Sophia replied, her expression neutral but knowing. "Have a good evening." As Ethan walked to the parking garage, a faint unease gnawed at him. Isabella had been acting differently lately, distant, even cold. The warmth that once defined their relationship seemed to have been replaced by something sharper, more cutting. He climbed into his modest Honda Accord, a car chosen specifically to complement his fictitious lifestyle, and merged into the slow crawl of city traffic. The journey home gave him too much time to dwell on recent moments that unsettled him. There was the dinner party last week, where Isabella had barely spared him a glance, too busy showering attention on some who she'd just met, or how she rolled her eyes whenever he offered suggestions for her interior design business, dismissing his input like it was laughable. When he pulled into the driveway of their modest suburban home, he took a deep breath, bracing himself. Inside, he found Isabella in the kitchen, aggressively chopping vegetables, her movements quick and forceful. "Hey, honey," Ethan began cautiously. "Sorry I'm late. The boss had me working on those projections and save it," Isabella snapped, not even glancing up. "I'm sure it was very important." Her sharp tone hit him like a slap. "Is something wrong? You seem upset," he ventured. Isabella slammed the knife onto the cutting board, finally meeting his gaze. Her eyes, once warm and inviting, now glinted with icy disdain. "Oh, I'm just fantastic," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Why wouldn't I be? It's not like I just lost the biggest contract of my career or anything." Ethan's stomach twisted. He knew how much he had been banking on the downtown hotel redesign. "What happened?" he asked, genuinely concerned. "What happened?" Isabella hissed, her frustration bubbling over. "I got passed over for some hack with connections. That's what happened. Apparently, in this world, it doesn't matter how talented you are if you don't know the right people." Ethan felt a pang of guilt. He could have easily secured the contract for her with a single phone call, but doing so would have risked exposing the elaborate charade of their life together. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I know how much effort you put into that proposal." Isabella let out a bitter laugh. "Saw the E. Sorry doesn't pay the bills, does it?" Her voice was sharp, each word a jab. "God, I can't believe I'm stuck here in this." This mediocrity, while people like Julian Whittaker live the life I deserve. Ethan froze at the name. Julian Whittaker, one of Carter Innovation's top executives and a man infamous for his charm and questionable morals. Julian Whittaker, he asked, his chest tightening. Yes, Julian Whittaker, she said, her voice softening, almost dreamlike. Now there's a man. Successful. Powerful. He gets things done, not like some people I could mention. Each word sliced through Ethan. The unspoken comparison was clear, and it stung. I'm sure he's worked very hard to get where he is. Ethan replied evenly, suppressing the hurt rising in his chest. Isabella rolled her eyes with a scoff. Men like him don't have to work hard. They're born great. They don't settle for being some corporate nobody their whole lives. Ethan's chest ached. Was this how she had seen him all along? A small, insignificant man, unworthy of her respect? He thought back to the early days of their relationship, wondering if he had missed signs of this disdain. I thought you were happy with our life, he said quietly. Happy? Isabella's laugh was harsh, devoid of joy. Happy with what? This tiny house? Your pathetic paycheck? Watching my dreams die, while you refused to even try for a promotion. Ethan's jaw tightened. He had given her everything she ever asked for: lavish vacations, designer jewelry, money for her business, all while pretending to be someone far more ordinary. And still it wasn't enough. I provide for us, he said, his voice edged with frustration. We have a good life. A good life. Isabella's voice rose, her temper flaring. This isn't living, Ethan. This is existing. I'm suffocating in this small, stagnant life. She began pacing, throwing her hands in the air. Do you know what Julian said to me at that networking event last month? He told me I have real potential, Isabella said, her voice rising with conviction. He said someone with my talent and drive shouldn't be wasting away in the suburbs. And you know what? He's absolutely right. A flicker of jealousy ignited in Ethan's chest, but he quickly smothered it. He knew Julian Whittaker's reputation all too well. The man was a predator, collecting mistresses like trophies and discarding them the moment they bored him. The idea of Isabella falling into his orbit made Ethan's stomach churn. Julian Whittaker doesn't know the first thing about you, Ethan said, keeping his tone as level as he could. He's just another smooth-talking businessman. Isabella spun on him, her eyes blazing. At least he sees me, Ethan. At least he values what I bring to the table. What have you ever done to help me? When was the last time you introduced me to someone who could actually make a difference? The bitter irony of her accusation wasn't lost on Ethan. He could have opened every door for her, cleared her path entirely. But he had wanted her to succeed on her own, to build her accomplishments without the shadow of his influence looming over them. I've supported you in every way I know how, Ethan said, a note of pleading creeping into his voice. I've always believed in you, Isabella. Supported me? She repeated with a scoff. By doing what? Patting me on the head and telling me to keep at it? That's not support, Ethan. That's condescension. You treat me like I'm a child playing at a hobby. Her words hit like a sledgehammer, but Ethan refused to let the pain show. He'd stared down hostile boardrooms and ruthless competitors without flinching. He wasn't about to let his wife see him crumble. I'm sorry you feel that way, he said, his voice cool and controlled. But what would you have me do? Quit my job? Drain our savings so you can chase after every opportunity that comes your way? Isabella's eyes narrowed, her voice sharpening to a point. There you go again, acting like I'm some flighty dreamer who doesn't know what she's doing. I'm good at what I do, Ethan. I could be great if I just had the chance to prove myself. And you think Julian Whittaker is the one who's going to give you that chance? Ethan asked, his composure slipping as the edge and his voice sharpened. Men like him don't give without expecting something in return. Her laugh was cold and cutting. Oh, so now you're an expert on successful men? That's rich, coming from someone who's been stuck in the same dead-end job for years. Face it, Ethan, you're holding me back. You're holding us back with your complacency. The accusation lingered in the air like a thundercloud, heavy and electric. Something inside Ethan shifted in that moment, a resolve he hadn't realized he was capable of. I see, he said, his tone dangerously soft. So what? You think you'd be better off without me dragging you down? The silence that followed was answer enough. Ethan nodded slowly, the decision forming with startling clarity. "All right then," he said. "If that's how you feel, maybe it's best if I go." For the first time that evening, uncertainty flickered across Isabella's face. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. "You're clearly unhappy," Ethan said, maddeningly calm. "You think I'm standing in the way of the life you deserve, so I'll step aside." Problem solved. He turned toward the hallway, retrieving the small duffel bag he always kept ready for business trips. "Ethan, don't be ridiculous," Isabella said, the sharpness in her voice giving way to unease. "Where are you even going to go?" "I'm sure I'll figure something out," he replied coolly, refusing to meet her eyes as he tossed in a few essentials. "Maybe I'll crash with a co-worker for a while." Her composure began to crack. "You can't just leave," she said, her voice tinged with panic. "We need to talk about this." Ethan stopped at the front door, finally turning to face her. "I think you've already said everything that needs to be said," he said quietly. "You made it clear how you see me, as a fool, as a failure, as someone who's holding you back from the greatness you think you're entitled to." He took a steadying breath, his gaze hardening. "So I'm going to do what any good husband would do. I'm going to step out of your way and let you chase the life you're so sure you deserve." "Ethan, wait." Isabella started, reaching out for him, but he was already stepping through the door. "Goodbye, Isabella," he said softly. "I hope you find what you're looking for." The door closed behind him with a finality that echoed in the cool night air. As Ethan drove through the dimly lit streets, his mind swirled with a storm of emotions. Anger burned bright. Anger at Isabella's casual cruelty, at her inability to see all that he'd sacrificed for her. But beneath the anger was something unexpected: relief. For years, he had bent himself into a shape that fit her expectations, hiding his accomplishments, his ambitions, his true self. And for what? To be belittled, dismissed, compared unfavorably to men who weren't worthy to stand in his shadow. His grip tightened on the steering wheel as a new feeling began to rise: determination. He was done pretending, done playing small. He pulled into the underground parking lot of his office building, nodding to the night security guard as he strode toward the private elevator. Within moments, he was back in his sanctuary, his corner office, overlooking the glittering expanse of the city. This was who he truly was: Ethan Carter, CEO and founder of Carter Innovations. A man of vision, power, and unrelenting resolve. But he wasn't ready to reveal that to Isabella. Not yet. No, he would watch and wait. He would see how she fared without him quietly smoothing her path, holding her up. He would let her face the harsh realities of the world she claimed to be ready for. And when the inevitable happened, when she tasted the bitter truth of failure, of betrayal, only then would he show her the man she had discarded. Only then would she realize what she had thrown away. Ethan's reflection in the glass was hard, unyielding. The time for lies and games was over. The real Ethan Carter was ready to emerge, and heaven help anyone who dared to stand in his way. As the first rays of dawn filtered through the blinds of his office, Ethan stretched, his body stiff from a night spent in his leather chair. The events of the previous evening were still fresh, raw in his mind. His phone vibrated on the desk, displaying 37 missed calls from Isabella. He didn't bother to open them. A sharp knock broke his focus. Sophia entered, her surprise evident as she took in his rumpled appearance. "Mr. Carter," she said cautiously, "I wasn't expecting you here so early." Straightening his tie, Ethan met her gaze with steely resolve. "Clear my schedule for the next few days. I have personal matters to attend to." Sophia hesitated, concern flickering across her face. "Of course. Is everything all right?" "It will be," Ethan replied curtly. Then, after a beat, he added, "I need you to keep an eye on Isabella's business dealings." Discreetly. Sophia's eyebrows shot up in shock, but she quickly masked it. "Understood, sir." Ethan's jaw tightened. "She believes she doesn't need me. Let's give her the opportunity to prove it." Sophia frowned. "Are you certain that's a wise approach?" A bitter laugh escaped Ethan. "Probably not, but it's necessary. She wants to play in the big leagues. Let's see if she can survive without me clearing the way." Sophia nodded hesitantly before leaving to carry out his orders. Alone again, Ethan turned to his computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he accessed Isabella's business records. Her interior design firm, while modestly successful on the surface, owed much of its stability to his silent investments and well-placed connections. Now it was time to see how it would stand without its invisible foundation. For hours, Ethan meticulously unraveled the web of support he'd built for her, canceling contracts, redirecting deals, severing the lifelines she never knew existed. His phone buzzed endlessly with Isabella's increasingly desperate calls, but he ignored them all until, finally, he picked up. "Ethan." Isabella's voice cracked with emotion. "Where are you? Please come home. We need to talk." "Do we?" Ethan's tone was cold, devoid of warmth. "I thought you made yourself perfectly clear last night." "I didn't mean," she began, but he cut her off. "Oh, you meant every word. Congratulations, Isabella. You're free of the deadweight. Now you can take your shot at greatness." Her choked sob on the other end of the line made his chest ache, but he steeled himself. Ethan Carter hadn't built an empire by being weak. He ended the call without another word, silencing the pang of guilt gnawing at him. In the days that followed, Ethan buried himself in his work. He expanded Carter Innovations' reach, striking new deals and solidifying his company's dominance. All the while, he monitored Isabella's flailing efforts to keep her business afloat. Without his unseen support, her firm began to falter. He heard whispers of missed deadlines, unhappy clients, and dwindling opportunities. Still, he let her struggle, determined to let her face the consequences of her choices. One afternoon, Sophia entered his office, her expression grim. She handed him a tablet, her voice hesitant. "Sir, I thought you should see this. It's about Mrs. Carter." Ethan glanced at the screen, his jaw tightening as he saw a photo of Isabella on the arm of Julian Whittaker, featured in a tabloid gossip column. "Well," Ethan said evenly, though his voice carried a dangerous undertone, "it seems my wife has found herself a new benefactor." Sophia shifted uncomfortably. "There's more, sir. Mr. Whittaker has been asking questions about you. He's making discreet inquiries into your role at Carter Innovations." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Is that so? Interesting. Thank you, Sophia. That will be all." Once alone, Ethan mulled over this new development. Whittaker was ambitious, always sniffing out opportunities to climb higher. And Isabella? She'd made her priorities crystal clear. His phone rang again. "Isabella." This time he answered. "What is it?" he asked coldly. "Ethan," she began, her voice breaking. "Please, I need your help. The Rothwell account is threatening to pull out. If I lose this deal, I'm finished." Ethan's laugh was devoid of humor. "Funny how quickly greatness turns to ruin, isn't it? What about all those powerful connections you were so proud of? Where are they now?" "I was wrong, okay?" she cried. "I said terrible things. But please, Ethan, I can't do this without you." For a brief moment, Ethan felt tempted to step in, but the memory of her sneering face and cutting words hardened his resolve. "Yes, you can," he said flatly. "This is what you wanted, remember? The big leagues. Sink or swim. Isabella." He ended the call, ignoring the guilt twisting in his gut. She'd made her bed. Now she could lie in it. Weeks passed. Ethan watched from the sidelines as Isabella's world crumbled. Her business spiraled toward bankruptcy, her reputation tarnished in the same society pages that once sang her praises. And through it all, Julian Whittaker hovered, circling like a predator, scenting blood in the water. One evening, as Ethan was preparing to leave the office, his private line rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Hello," he answered cautiously. "Mr. Carter," came a smooth, self-assured voice. "Julian Whittaker here. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. "Not at all, Mr. Whittaker. What can I do for you?" "I think it's more a question of what I can do for you," Whittaker replied with a slick chuckle. "I've recently become acquainted with your charming wife. She speaks very highly of you." Ethan's voice remained neutral. "Does she now? How interesting." "Oh, indeed," Whittaker purred. "She seems to think you're something of a hidden asset at Carter Innovations. I must say, I find that intriguing." Ethan's mind raced. So Isabella had been digging, likely fishing for leverage. No doubt, Ethan said carefully. But I'm not sure what she's told you. I'm just a mid-level manager, nothing more. Whitaker's chuckle grew sharper. Come now, Mr. Carter. We both know that's not true. I've done my homework. The way capital moves under your watch, the whispers of your influence. You're far more than you let on. Ethan said nothing, calculating his next move. Whitaker pressed on. I have a proposition for you, Mr. Carter. One I think you'll find mutually beneficial. Why don't we meet for dinner tomorrow night? Le Benada? Yito du soir. I appreciate the offer, Ethan replied coolly, but I'm quite content with my current position. Whitaker's laugh turned predatory. Are you? Well, perhaps your lovely wife might be interested in discussing her future then. She seems quite open to new opportunities. Whitaker's voice dripped with smug arrogance, the threat barely concealed. Ethan's blood simmered, but his tone remained calm and controlled. My wife's business dealings are her own concern, Mr. Whitaker, he said coldly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have more pressing matters to attend to. He ended the call before Whitaker could respond, tossing the phone onto his desk. His mind churned with anger and betrayal. Isabella, feeding Whitaker bits of information, real or fabricated, in an attempt to secure her place at his side. And Whitaker, ever the predator, tried to twist the situation to his advantage. Ethan's jaw tightened. He let this charade go on long enough. It was time to end it. The next morning, he summoned Sophia into his office. I need you to arrange a meeting, he said briskly. Julian Whitaker, Isabella, and myself. Here, this afternoon. Sophia's eyes widened in alarm. Are you sure, Mr. Cart? I'm sure, Ethan replied grimly. It's time to lay my cards on the table. Make it happen. By mid-afternoon, Ethan stood at the window of his office, watching as a sleek black car rolled up to the building. Isabella stepped out first, her posture tense, her face pale and drawn. Whitaker followed, his shark-like grin visible even from a distance. Ethan inhaled deeply, bracing himself for what was to come. The intercom buzzed. Sophia's voice came through. Mr. Carter, they're here. Send them in, he replied, his back still to the room. The heavy door creaked open, and he heard Isabella's sharp intake of breath. He could almost feel Whitaker's predatory gaze sweeping over the lavish office. Ethan? Isabella's voice was small, confused. What's going on? Why are we here? Slowly, Ethan turned to face them. Gone was the mild-mannered persona he had so carefully crafted over the years. In its place stood the true Ethan Carter, a titan of industry, the man who had built an empire from nothing. Welcome, he said, his voice cold and unyielding. I believe it's time we had a conversation. Whitaker recovered first, his grin never faltering. Mr. Carter, what an unexpected surprise. I must say, you've been holding out on us. Isabella's eyes darted between the two men, realization dawning. Ethan, she stammered, I don't understand. This office, are you the CEO? The founder of Carter Innovations? Yes, Isabella, Ethan said flatly. I am. Her face went white as the truth sank in. But all this time, why didn't you tell me? Ethan let out a bitter laugh. Why? Because I wanted you to love me for who I was, not for what I could give you. Clearly, that was a mistake. Whitaker stepped forward, his opportunistic nature shining through. Now, he said smoothly. Let's not rush to conclusions. I'm sure we can come to some arrangement that benefits all parties. Ethan's icy glare snapped to him. The only arrangement you need to worry about, Mr. Whitaker, is your severance package. As of this moment, you're no longer employed by Carter Innovations. Whitaker's confident smile faltered. You can't do that, he blustered. The board answers to me, Ethan interrupted. And they'll be very interested to hear about your attempts to manipulate company information for personal gain. Whitaker's face darkened. Now, see here, Carter? No, you see here, Ethan thundered, his voice reverberating through the room. You try to play me, both of you. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? That I wouldn't have contingencies in place? He pressed a button on his desk, and a holographic display flickered to life, showcasing emails, phone logs, and financial records. Every move Whitaker had made, every underhanded deal he'd attempted, was laid bare. I've known about it all, Ethan said, his tone deadly calm. And now you're done. Both of you. Isabella stepped forward, her eyes glistening with tears. Ethan, please. I didn't know. I never meant. Save it. Ethan snapped, his gaze cutting through her. You made your choices, Isabella. You've shown me exactly who you are and what you value. Now you get to live with the consequences. Whitaker, sensing defeat, adjusted his tie with feigned composure. Well, he said dryly, it seems I've overstayed my welcome. Mrs. Carter, I believe this concludes our business relationship. Good day. With that, he strode out, leaving Isabella alone with Ethan. For a long moment, silence reigned. She stared at him, her expression a mix of shock and dawning horror. All this time, she whispered, you were everything. Yes, Ethan said coldly. All this time, I gave you a life most people can only dream of. Isabella. Opportunities, comfort, security. And it still wasn't enough for you. Tears streamed down her face. I'm sorry, she choked out. God, Ethan, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. That's right, Ethan interrupted, his voice razor sharp. You didn't realize. You were so busy chasing some fantasy of greatness that you couldn't see what was right in front of you. Well, congratulations. You got what you wanted. A taste of the high life. How does it feel? Isabella's shoulders slumped, her defiance crumbling. Please, Ethan, she pleaded. I know I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But I love you. We can fix this. Can we? For a brief moment, Ethan felt a flicker of the warmth he once had for her. But then he remembered the sneering disdain, the cold dismissal, the betrayal. His heart hardened once more. No, Isabella. We can't. Some things, once broken, can't be repaired. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it. He turned back to the window, dismissing her without another glance. You'll hear from my lawyers regarding the divorce proceedings. Goodbye, Isabella. Behind him, he heard her stifled sob and the rustle of her clothes as she moved toward the door. She paused, her voice soft and full of regret. I really did love you, Ethan. He didn't turn around. No, Isabella. You loved the idea of me. The man you thought you could mold into your stepping stone to success. That man never existed. The door closed softly, leaving Ethan alone in his office. As the sun set over the city, casting long shadows across the room, Ethan felt the weight of everything that had transpired settle over him. The lies were done. The facade was gone. For better or worse, he was finally, fully himself. Ethan gazed out at the empire he had built, his jaw set with determination. The world had only seen a glimpse of the real Ethan Carter. Tomorrow they would see so much more. In the weeks that followed, the revelation of Carter Innovations' true mastermind sent ripples through the business world. Ethan Carter was a name no one would forget. The revelation of Ethan Carter as the true CEO of Carter Innovations thrust him into a spotlight he'd spent years avoiding. As the days passed, he adapted quickly, balancing the demands of his new visibility with the iron resolve he had honed over years of quiet leadership. One morning, while reviewing financial reports in his office, Sophia entered with a troubled expression. Mr. Carter, there's something you should see, she said, handing him a tablet. Ethan's eyes narrowed as he scanned the screen. It was an exposé on Isabella, detailing her dramatic downfall. Her design firm had collapsed, her once loyal social circle had abandoned her, and lawsuits from angry clients were piling up. Well, Ethan said, his voice as cold as the steel edge of his desk. It seems the house of cards has finally crumbled. Sophia hesitated. Sir, there's more. Mrs. Carter, Isabella has been trying to contact you. She's left messages with reception, saying it's urgent. Ethan's jaw tightened. I'm not interested in anything she has to say. Make sure reception knows to block her calls. Sophia nodded, though concern lingered in her eyes. Of course, Mr. Carter. Is there anything else you need? Ethan waved her off. No, that'll be all. As Sophia left, Ethan turned his focus back to his work, refusing to let thoughts of Isabella distract him. She'd made her bed. Now she could lie in it. Days turned into weeks as Ethan threw himself into his work with a renewed sense of purpose. He attended board meetings, struck ambitious deals, and pushed Carter innovations toward even greater success. Yet, despite his achievements, a lingering emptiness remained, a quiet void he couldn't ignore. One evening, as he prepared to leave his office, his private line rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Ethan Carter," he answered brusquely. "Mr. Carter," came a smooth, warm voice. "This is Clara Monroe, from the Children's Hope Foundation. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." Ethan's brow furrowed. He knew the charity well. It was one of the organizations he supported anonymously. "Not at all, Ms. Monroe. What can I do for you?" "Well, Mr. Carter," Clara continued, her voice earnest, "I'm calling to thank you for your generous donation. It's made an incredible difference in our programs. I was hoping we could meet to discuss how we're using the funds and perhaps explore ways to expand our partnership." Ethan hesitated. He typically avoided direct involvement with the charities he supported, preferring to work through intermediaries. Yet something about Clara's tone intrigued him. "I suppose that could be arranged," he said finally. "How about lunch tomorrow? There's a bistro near my office." "That sounds perfect," Clara replied, the smile in her voice evident. "I look forward to meeting you, Mr. Carter." The next day, Ethan found himself seated across from Clara Monroe in a cozy corner of the bistro. She wasn't what he expected. Instead of a tailored power suit or a polished sales pitch, she wore a simple sundress, her warm smile reaching her eyes. "Mr. Carter," she began, her voice full of gratitude, "thank you so much for meeting with me. The work we've been able to do thanks to your support is nothing short of remarkable." Ethan nodded, feeling slightly off balance. "I'm glad to hear that, Ms. Monroe, though I prefer to keep my philanthropic efforts low-key." Clara's smile widened. "I'm well aware of that, Mr. Carter. Your reputation for anonymous giving is well known in my circles. That's one reason I wanted to meet you in person." Leaning forward, her eyes sparkled with conviction. "You see, it's not just about the money, it's about the impact. And with your influence, I believe we could do so much more." For the next hour, Clara outlined her ambitious vision for expanding the foundation's reach. After-school programs in underserved communities, mentorship initiatives, and scholarships for promising students. Ethan found himself captivated by her enthusiasm and her genuine commitment to making a difference. It was a refreshing change from the self-serving attitudes he'd grown accustomed to. As their meeting concluded, Ethan made a decision. "Ms. Monroe," he said, "I'm impressed by your dedication. I'd like to arrange a tour of some of your facilities, if that's possible." Clara's face lit up. "Of course. I'd be delighted to show you the difference we're making firsthand. And please call me Clara." A faint smile tugged at Ethan's lips. "Clara it is then, and you can call me Ethan." In the weeks that followed, Ethan spent more and more time with Clara. They toured community centers, visited schools, and brainstormed ways to enhance the foundation's impact. Her passion was infectious, and Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: genuine connection. One evening, after a particularly successful fundraising event, the two strolled through a park. The cool evening breeze carried the distant hum of the city as they walked in companionable silence. "Ethan," Clara said softly, breaking the quiet, "can I ask you something personal?" He turned slightly, nodding. "Go ahead. Why do you do all this?" She gestured vaguely. "The anonymous donations, the behind-the-scenes support. You could use your wealth and influence to boost your public image, but instead, you stay in the shadows. Why?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, considering her question. "I suppose," he said finally, "it's because I wanted people to appreciate me for who I am, not for what I have." He let out a bitter laugh. "That worked out well for me in the end, didn't it?" Clara tilted her head, her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Before he realized what he was doing, Ethan found himself recounting everything: the deception with Isabella, her betrayal, and the fallout that had followed. For the first time, he allowed himself to truly unburden. When he finished, Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and gently squeezed his hand. "Ethan, I'm so sorry you went through that. But I want you to know, the man I've gotten to know these past few weeks, he's pretty incredible. Billions or no billions." For the first time in months, Ethan smiled. A real, genuine smile. Their relationship deepened in the weeks that followed. Ethan found himself lowering the walls he had so carefully built. opening up in ways he hadn't thought possible. Clara was unlike anyone he had ever known. Kind, authentic, and completely unimpressed by his wealth or status. One afternoon, as they were leaving a foundation board meeting, Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and froze. It was Isabella. Clara noticed his reaction, her eyes filled with concern. "Is everything okay?" she asked gently. Ethan hesitated, then held up the phone to show Clara. "It's my ex-wife. She's been trying to reach me for weeks." Clara's expression was understanding, but her tone was firm. "Maybe it's time you listened to her. For closure, if nothing else." He nodded slowly. "You're right. I need to face this." Taking a deep breath, he answered, "Isabella." "Ethan." Her voice was frantic, thick with desperation. "Thank God you finally answered. I need your help. Everything's falling apart, and I don't know what to do." Ethan's jaw tightened, his voice clipped. "What do you want, Isabella? Can we meet?" "Please," she pleaded. "I know I have no right to ask, but I'm desperate." Ethan glanced at Clara, who gave him an encouraging nod. He sighed. "Fine. My office. 1 hour." An hour later, Ethan sat behind his desk, Clara seated beside him, a steadying presence. When Isabella was shown in, she was almost unrecognizable. Her once polished appearance was gone. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair unkempt, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. "Ethan," she began, her voice faltering as her gaze landed on Clara. "Who's this?" "This is Clara," Ethan said firmly. "She's with me now. What do you want, Isabella?" Isabella's eyes darted between them, a flicker of jealousy crossing her face before desperation overtook her. "I need your help, Ethan. The lawsuits, the debts. I'm drowning. If you could just talk to some people, pull some strings." "No," Ethan interrupted, his voice hard as stone. "I won't do that, Isabella. Your actions, your choices, they're yours to deal with." Her face crumpled, and tears began to fall. "Please, Ethan. I know I hurt you, but we had something once. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" Ethan felt Clara's hand rest lightly on his arm, a silent reassurance. He took a steadying breath before replying. "It did mean something, Isabella, but you destroyed that. You showed me exactly who you are and what you value. I won't be your safety net anymore." Isabella's tears streamed freely now. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked, her voice breaking. "You'll do what everyone else does," Ethan said, his tone softening slightly. "You'll pick yourself up and start over. Build something real this time, not just a facade." Her eyes filled with fresh desperation. "And us? Is there any chance? Any way we can?" Ethan shook his head firmly. "No, Isabella. That chapter of our lives is closed. I've moved on. I suggest you do the same." With a choked sob, Isabella turned and fled the office. Ethan let out a long breath, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time, he felt truly free. Clara squeezed his hand gently. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft. Ethan looked at her and smiled, a sense of peace settling over him. "Yeah, I am. For the first time in a long time, I really am." In the months that followed, Ethan's life transformed. He stepped fully into his role as the public face of Carter Innovations, no longer hiding behind a carefully maintained facade. Under his open leadership, the company flourished, and his philanthropic efforts expanded, touching countless lives. The biggest change, however, was in his personal life. His relationship with Clara deepened, built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. She challenged him, supported him, and most importantly, saw him for who he truly was, not the wealth or power he represented, but the strength of his character and the depth of his heart. One evening, as they walked hand in hand through the park where they'd first had a meaningful conversation, Ethan turned to Clara, his expression thoughtful. "You know," he began softly, "I used to think that hiding my wealth was the only way to find someone who loved me for me. But I was wrong. It wasn't about the money at all. It was about finding someone who values the same things I do. Someone who pushes me to be better." Clara looked up at him with a warm smile. "And have you found that someone?" Instead of answering with words, Ethan kissed her, soft, slow, and full of promise. As they broke apart, He rested his forehead against hers. "I think I have," he murmured. "If she'll have me." Clara laughed, the sound light and joyful. "I think I could be arranged." As they continued their walk, Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. The pain of Isabella's betrayal, the loneliness of his self-imposed isolation, it had all led him here, to a place where he could finally be himself, wholly and without reservation. For a brief moment, he thought of Isabella. He hoped she would find her way, but he no longer felt burdened by her choices. She was no longer his concern. His future lay ahead, bright with possibility, with a woman who valued him not for his fortune or his status, but for the man he truly was. Ethan Carter, the man who had hidden in plain sight for so long, had finally stepped into the light, and he found it was warmer and brighter than he'd ever imagined.